Star Wars only, I don't know what the fuck your problem is.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of LucasArts? What's up guys, Star Wars Only here, and today we are going to talk about the tragedy of LucasArts, a game studio many people loved and admired, and it just basically died out. I mean, it died out A, by Disney, and B, by itself. Now, a lot of people will blame Disney for LucasArts being destroyed. However, Disney is not at fault here. This is actually all LucasArts and Lucasfilm's own problem, and even George Lucas himself for not understanding the game industry like he should have. Which is understandable, being, he wasn't really involved in the game industry, but he had a lot of impact on LucasArts and why they died out. So today we're going to talk about what happened to LucasArts, why it died, and why the last game you got from it was The Force Unleashed 2. So it was started in 1982 and it died out officially in 2013 with the purchase of Lucasfilm by Disney. Therefore, Lucasfilm being the big brother company to LucasArts, LucasArts went with it and died as well. So what really happened? Well, a lot of LucasArts games were coming out, and a lot of people liked them. In 2005 and to 2008, I think, you had games like Battlefront 2, you had the Lego Star Wars games, you had these kind of games that were coming out that a lot of people did like, and the Lego ones did really well, but the other ones didn't do as well. And so, come 2011, the past few years, they realized that they weren't doing so well in sales. And this is a quote from the president at the time, Paul Megan, who spoke publicly about his plans for turning the company around. And I quote, "In recent years, LucasArts hasn't always done a good job of making games. We should be making games that define our medium, that are competitive with the best of our industry, but we're not. This has to change." End quote. So that was Paul Megan, one of the many presidents LucasArts had. And he was talking about how they're not making enough money, and even later on, if you look at everything that happened, they weren't making enough to really help the company keep going, to really, fund all the games that they wanted to make. And there was so many change with executives. Paul Megan was one of the many presidents that they had, and between the years of 2008 and 2012, they had 4 different presidents. One term of Obama's presidency had 4 different presidents in LucasArts. So that's 4 presidents, that's 1 president a year for LucasArts. That's constantly changing, and they all had different ideologies on what to do with this company. So in early 2009, a small team of LucasArts employees started working on a Star Wars game that they called Underworld. According to 2 people familiar with the project, this game was designed to complement an in-development television show of the same name called Underworld. And it went through several early designs, and at one point it was an open-world Grand Theft Auto style game with quests and other RP-ish style elements. So this game sounds great already. If you really think about it, a Grand Theft Auto style Star Wars game sounds amazing. You get to travel the world of Star Wars characters and do whatever, and that just sounds great. But by the middle of the year of 2009, the project had been changed its entire course, basically. It went into a co-op shooter modeled after the Gears of War style of gameplay, and it was set during between episodes 3 and 4, kind of where Rebels is at right now. And this changed a lot. I mean, if you're changing a game, 6 months down the line, you're changing a lot. This new game would unfold on the planet Coruscant in the subterranean world of Level 1313, hint hint, nudge nudge. So stuff like this happened constantly at LucasArts. They were always changing their ideas. The staff put early prototypes of the game Underworld out, and they kind of joked of it, calling it the Gears of Star Wars, because it was exactly like Gears of War with the style and gameplay that they had. But in mid-2010, when Paul Megan took over as president of the studio, he didn't think the game was innovative enough. According to the person familiar with the situation, they said that some key Underworld staff agreed, and they rebooted the game again. So this stuff happening, of course, delays games and delays projects, but it also causes mass confusion because it's kind of hard to pinpoint what you want. You go from a Grand Theft Auto style game to a Gears of War style game, and that's just not how this should work. But, I digress. So you had a lot of things like this in LucasArts. They were constantly rushing things. You look at Battlefront 3. Well, they weren't really rushing that. My bad, Battlefront 2. That's the one they rushed. So I don't know if you knew this, but the president at the time, this was in 2005 or 4, I can't remember. 2005. When Battlefront 2 was coming out, 4 or 5 months prior to the game being released, the president of LucasArts said, "Hey, I want a campaign in this game," because originally Battlefront was supposed to be a multiplayer-only style game. However, the president said, "I wanted a actual single-player campaign," and therefore they had to change not everything, but they had to implement a campaign in a matter of months. Something that's almost impossible to do, and it's surprising that they pulled it off so well. So you rush a game like that, and you got really lucky with this one, but then you get games like The Force Unleashed 2. And I've already made a video called The Tragedy of The Force Unleashed, so go check that out to hear more about that. But like I've said prior to this video, Force Unleashed 2 was rushed, and therefore wasn't that great. And it was actually the last game by LucasArts until they were bought by Disney. So things like this happened all the time. They're rushing games. They rushed Battlefront 2, The Force Unleashed 2, and they had negotiation problems on many other games. With Battlefront 3 by Free Radical wanted more money. They wanted more funds, and they were trying to negotiate, but the negotiations fell through. Therefore, the game just was not made. And this happened so many times with LucasArts. Executives wouldn't allow games to go through and get to even the beta stages because they simply didn't think they were going to sell or do well at all. You take a look at that GTA Star Wars game. They were trying to make it on their own. LucasArts did. They were trying to make some of it, but Lucasfilm executives said, no, that's going to cost, we're going to have a couple hundred employees working on that, and it's going to cost us millions of dollars to make. We're not willing to risk that. Therefore, it never was made, and it never made $1 because they didn't make it at all. Which, in my opinion, is stupid because I think that game would have done really, really well. And then you have things like First Assault, where George Lucas goes, you know what, I want to compete with Call of Duty and Battlefield and whatnot, let's make First Assault. And so the LucasArts team started working on that, and it was supposed to be during the era of Return of the Jedi. Not like Empire Strikes Back, New Hope, like literally just during Return of the Jedi and maybe a little after. And then guess what happens? Lucas comes back in and says, you know what, why don't we go more towards the Clone Wars era? And so you have to change everything you just did, which is not good for games. Lucas was a huge problem with LucasArts, and the reason being is because he would come in, he would say what he wanted, and it would already be a year after they were working on a certain project. You take 1313, for example. They were making the game, they had a certain character in there, I forget his name, but they had this certain character, and then Lucas comes in going, hey, I really like this game, but let's make the main character Boba Fett. I want it to be a Boba Fett story. So now what does LucasArts have to do? They have to change everything. It's not like a movie where you can go, okay, well, let's just change the name, and then we got to reshoot some scenes and rewrite the script just a little bit. None too big, though. With a video game, it's like, all right, well, we already spent a lot of money making this, we already spent a lot of time making this, and now we got to remake it to put in this new character and some new lines, some new voice, and all this stuff. And you have to make the models and everything. You have to do all this stuff just because of one small change like this. And it's understandable that games go through changes. However, when it's a major change on the main character, it does mess up the game a lot. And Lucas did this constantly with the LucasArts crew. And the changing of executives happened all the time. There was one time where the LucasArts staff was talking about how the president at the time, I can't remember which one, I think it was a female. What was her name? I can't remember, but she basically was like micromanaging George Lucas, and she would tell her staff, hey, you can't really talk to him that much. You can't say too much, do all this stuff. And so it's stuff like this where the executives really killed LucasArts. They really didn't help them progress or do anything to make these games. They just kind of were like, all right, well, good luck, but this isn't going to make money, so fuck off, you can't make it. And so as time went on, they're not making sales, you're not making any good games because you're not willing to risk anything. And then what do you expect? They have a hiring freeze. And everybody was baffled. They're like, wow, we have a hiring freeze. Why they couldn't make anything. They couldn't continue the game First Assault like they wanted to. They couldn't do anything like that. And that basically was the start of the fall of the company. You have a hiring freeze. I think the last president they had in 2012, they cut to what, 1/3 of the staff that they had. You literally change everything within your department, and you expect things to go well. It's idiotic. So, Lucasfilm made public declarations that everything was business as usual after the hiring freeze and after some of the layoffs, but we all know what happened. A year later, in 2013, it was bought by Disney. It completely just got gotten rid of. So, that's basically it. LucasArts destroyed itself. There's no one to blame but Lucas and LucasArts and Lucasfilm. They would go to Lucasfilm saying, hey, we want this, and they couldn't get it because Lucasfilm wasn't willing to risk the money. So, that, sadly, is the tragedy of LucasArts. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this one was a little long, but I really wanted to, vent and tell you everything that happened with LucasArts because there was a lot to go over. And I don't really want people blaming, a certain someone when it's not that certain someone's fault. It's a lot of people that really screwed this up. Having 4 presidents, having George Lucas come in constantly and try to change things really does not help. There actually was a time where EA was considering buying LucasArts and just kind of like micromanaging them. Well, not micro, but just managing them and say, hey, we'll fund your projects. We just want to make sure it's on the kind of the same things we want. But with the SimCity disaster and the president of EA leaving at the time, the deal fell through. So sadly, stuff like this happens. But what do you guys think? That was a tragedy of LucasArts. Do you miss LucasArts? What would you have done to change it? And do you think the games that they were going to create would have been successful? Comment your thoughts below. I'm Star Wars Only. I will see you all next time. May the Force be with you, always.